What's all this stuff? I'm a Canadian.
It's my First Amendment right. On steroids.
On steroids. So what is your message? What is your thing? You got InfoWars stuff. I'm just curious.
Are you familiar with InfoWars?
Alex Jones, is that who it is? I don't know very much because I'm Canadian. I'm from Newfoundland.
He has fans up there too.
Oh, I know. I work with a couple.
As my shtick is to engage people and, to find
create lively debate.
One would hope. I'd like to, I never knew who I'm going to run into out here. It's not me. I learn a lot. I run into people that have interesting careers. I spoke to a guy, the first guy this morning I spoke to is 41 years, I think he said, in the nuclear weapons facilities. I talk to people like that almost on a daily basis out here, and it's interesting.
It's pretty, out there, man.
Well, I would hope so.
That is, I don't know about that one.
What one?
The Hillary's.
Yeah. I know. Well, I'm not, if you go around, I'm tame. If you walk on Bourbon Street, this is tame.
Is it?
Oh, hell yeah. Take a walk on Bourbon Street, man. But Mardi Gras is essentially a celebration of mocking the powers that be.
I respect that. That's totally cool.
Yeah.
But man, there's some of this stuff, some of the InfoWars stuff I find walks a bit of an edge. Like I said, I don't know everything about it. But I am intrigued by it. I don't discredit it. I think that.
Well, the point that is that these guys are in power for one reason. To keep the people in power. They don't tell us the truth. That's the last thing they want to have out there.
Right.
I give you, for instance, there was a woman that came by a few months ago. Nice, beautiful young lady with a entourage. I asked what she did. She was a reporter for the Hill newspaper out of Washington, D.C., big publication.
Yeah.
So she was all full of herself, and I let her be all full of herself. But in the conversation, I got her to admit to me on video that there are subjects they are not allowed to cover that are taboo.
That's fair. Yeah. No, I understand that.
So,
it's not a free and open media.
Not at all. So Alex Jones, not having to take corporate money, is not beholden to restricting himself to what they can talk about.
I'm pretty sure Alex Jones is beholden to somebody. There's got to be money coming to him from someone who has to influence him somehow.
No, he sells his own products.
He sells his own product, but he has backers. He has to have backers.
No, he sells his own products. He sells good nutraceuticals, which I take religiously.
That's right.
And they are excellent. And I support his efforts. And so it's the people's media. He can talk about the poison vaccines or
chemtrails and ridiculous things like that.
Ridiculous things like that.
I don't buy the chemtrail thing.
You don't buy things like that?
Well, that one I don't really get.
I would ask you to look up this because it's in the congressional records.
There's a lot of things in the congressional records, not a lot.
Well, I'm going to give you what they...
aliens are in the congressional records. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. I don't think. I'm not.
Indeed, you're obviously not. I am. I have talked to pilots out here. I've talked to geo-engineers themselves. But it's not called chemtrails. It's called geoengineering. And if you look up the history of weather and climate modification, you will see the history going back to 1891 of private and governmental programs in the business of modifying weather and climate. So how do they do this? There's multiple ways they do it. One of it, and there's been for a long time, cloud seeding, of course, is very popular. As a matter of fact, if you get on your telephone right now, you can hire a company that will keep it from raining on your wedding day. Recently, China just publicized that they were...
How did they do that?
Again, they can do it.
How?
through, it's not that hard. If you look up the guy, it's a guy named Ben Livingston, Lieutenant Ben Livingston. He took over the Department of Weather and Climate Modification that Eisenhower formed and became known as the father of weather weapons. We used those weapons in Vietnam from 68 to 72, and that was leaked out that we were using weather weapons. The UN passed the UN Weather Weapons Treaty Ban. Now, they don't normally pass things against stuff we don't have.
Right.
So we have weather weapons. This is a given, okay? So these weather weapons are indeed spraying particulates in the clouds, and then they can go ahead and use things like HAARP, radio wave technology, to heat up these things and create clouds. They can even bounce that heat back down, and this is all in the congressional record. They actually brag about it, where they can form a hurricane and then steer the hurricane, so they can use it as a weather weapon. So these things exist. Now, the mainstream media is not telling you that. You will never hear that in any global warming conference.
Why? Why aren't they telling us that? It is true and it exists. And why won't they tell you that? Like, what does manipulating the weather?
Well, if you manipulate the weather, you can control crops. You can create wars by just starving people out. It's a weapon, so you can kill people. You know, you can create large group starvation, kill crops. You can do a lot of things with controlling the weather. Correct?
Here's my problem with with this whole thing, with the extremes on both sides, not necessarily just the extreme right and the extreme left. Like they're equally. I have issues with both. It's that when people start talking about it, like you're talking about it now, the more you get on a roll, the more patronizing it becomes, and the more angry it becomes. And I know I'm coming off as a little bit patronizing from time to time too. I get it.
You think so?
I do think so.
Yeah.
You see, you're doing it right
well,
now.
I do.
I'm admitting to it. Like,
understand. You know what I mean? I out here, on a daily basis.
You must hear a lot of people.
On a daily basis, I'm called a racist a half dozen times, an idiot a dozen times. I've been spit on. I've had things thrown at me. I've had people come at me aggressively.
Right.
So I tend to get a little defense. I know, but also the condescending tone pisses me off because I forgot more about than most people know about this shit because I helped start the Institute for Environmental Alternatives with Professor Ron Cohn in 1971.
Okay.
So I lived with scientists for 3 years and studied this.
Okay.
So again, I forgot more than most people know about it.
Okay.
So when I talk about this, I know what I'm talking about.
I'm sure you do.
So the fact that they have these things, it will not bring them up in any global warming conference. There's a puzzlement. Why won't they talk about these weather manipulation programs we have in global warming conferences? Why won't they do that?
I don't know.
Because it blows the whole global warming thing out of the water.
Okay.
I mean, if we can go ahead and control the weather and climate, what the hell are we talking about it going out of control for? But it is going out of control because, like everything that we do in this instance, when we start messing around with Mother Nature, we don't know the long-term implications of what we're doing.
What benefit is it to destroy the argument on either side? What benefit is it to say that global warming doesn't exist and it's a sham and it's bullshit versus global warming exists and we should do something about it?
What the fuck can we do about global warming?
Well, we started it.
What the fuck proof of that? Where do you get the proof of that? Where do we start? How did we start? There were warming. There were warming and cooling, but there were warming and cooling periods throughout history, even before man came. I mean, they were growing grapes in northern England in the 15th century. What caused that? Cow flatulence?
That's a good point. I have no idea.
So, I mean, how can you say, and here's the kicker, you're going to love this. The big boogeyman is CO2, right? Ooh, we're producing too much CO2. Ooh. Okay. I've asked this to people that say they're in the field, that are professionals. I've asked this question, they didn't know the answer. Right now, how much CO2 and how much CO2 is in the atmosphere?
I have no idea, man.
Well, if we're talking about global warming, you should know what is the optimum level.
I'd say it's global warming.
Well, you know, because they say that's what's causing it. There's too much CO2 in the air. Correct. Okay. So, but how much CO2 in the air? It's a trace element. It's 0.04%. It's been that way for 1,000 years. So, to say that we're producing too much carbon, 97% with the best that we can measure of that 0.04% is natural. It comes from decay and the oceans, you know.
I don't know because I'm not a scientist.
Well, these are facts you can readily look up. It's not mystery.
It's a much more complicated issue, and there's much more to global warming science than just Googling.
That's why you cannot go ahead and say, because there's no evidence to say that we caused it.
But there's also no evidence to say that we didn't cause it.
What the hell there isn't? I'm just bringing that up. The fact that that you can say.
I've had enough now.
I'm just saying.
I know, but I'm done now.
To say that we have an effect.
I'm good. I'm on vacation. You do your thing, man. You have the right to do it.
Well.
But you should not be rude to people, and you shouldn't be racist or fucked up to people. That's all I gotta say.
Well, who's racist or fucked up to people? But did I hurt your little feelings?